Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tavern Talks. Today is our Tuesday podcast where we discuss Eberron with some of our GMs that have been running sessions. And all that information can be found in our Discord. So if you're interested in jumping in and playing some Eberron with us, playing some D&D, then please join our Discord. We've got some great GMs with us today to discuss about it, talk about it. So Tavern of Tales is a board game bar in Boston. We're currently closed due to the pandemic. However, things are starting to look up with openings, so hopefully we'll be open again soon. Until then, we're running a lot of online things to keep people together, build a sense of community, and give us something to do. So we're talking about D&D, we talk about board games, TTRPGs of all different types. And on this channel that you're watching right now, you can find lots of different things, such as Magic the Gathering on Mondays and Thursdays with another GM, Tyler. We have Shattered Lands on Wednesdays, on Wednesdays and Fridays, which is a D&D homebrew campaign with GM Jake. And Tavern Talks, such as today, on Tuesdays and Saturdays, where we discuss anything from board games, TTRPGs, to Eberron, the Eberron campaign that we run in our Discord. So our season 2 began, and we're coming in strong. It's very exciting. And I have with us today, with me, your host, and your other host, Lily. And we're going to be talking to some GMs. So why don't we jump right in and get started with that. But before we do, remember, we are Twitch affiliates. So if you want to subscribe, it helps us out a lot, and it's much appreciated. So I'll introduce our GMs. Today we have Austin Hatch.
Hello.
We have Austin W.
Hello, everyone.
We have Andre.
Hey.
Those are GMs, and I also said we have Lily.
I'm also here, yes.
So I'm going to open up for some discussion with the GMs. Why don't we start off with a question about, throw it out to anyone that wants to answer first. Can you tell us a little bit about the session you ran most recently, and how did it go?
Yeah, I can go first. I did mine, and it was a very hack and slash type of thing. I'm more of a hack and slash type of guy. So we have gotten word that there was a temple in some backwoods area, some like minor thing to ROA, one of the sovereign host goddess, and there's been like some nightmares and darkness kind of afoot, and they had been putting priests down in their catacombs where this darkness was, but none of them have come back. And so they kind of asked us for our help. And when we got there, one of the higher priests of the area had explained that there actually were deeper secrets, that there was a temple to one of the demon lords underneath, the Dark Six, and that the original founders of the good temple had built some kind of artifacts and some type of magic to keep the darkness of the Underdark at bay, but they had assumed that was failing. So there was a labyrinth scene, which was very fun, watching the players scavenge around that, and then a big demon fight from the Underdark in order to quash the evil.
So you're already playing with a lot of Delcaire in your session then?
Yes, I love the Delcaire. I love demons. I love madness, that kind of evil. So,
Ooh, okay.
Very exciting. Andre?
So, very interesting. The last session that I've had to make was a lot more about like an intrigue. It was about disappearances on this village in the Moorholds that was also having a land dispute happening over it. So I tried to kind of mix these two situations where it's like, ooh, there's political reasons and also mysterious stuff happening. So it could go either way. Some interesting things that happened in that session, give you a peek behind the curtain. What was actually happening is that one of the two parties interested in taking the land over for themselves sent a team of representatives to investigate some ruins beneath the village to find proof that this land was theirs to own. While they were down there, their captain got attacked by himself by an exiled mind flayer who then took over his identity and was kind of manipulating everything in the town. So, you know, anyone who kind of caught wind of the situation got killed and replaced or went missing. so like the much of that session was the players kind of trying to keep a low profile and piecing this stuff together, which they didn't really know about. But it eventually ended up in them sneaking in through the ruins to find the captain's yurt in the middle of the ruins, where he was out of disguise and about to eat one of the villagers that they were speaking with before. So that's fun stuff. They managed to kill the mind flayer and his horrible creatures in what I think was a very well executed combat on their part. I was like, ooh, I'm gonna be clever. I'm gonna put a mind flayer in here. He's gonna shoot a bunch of spells around. There's gonna be this creature that I homebrew. It's huge. It's in the middle of the stage, and they they demolished it. Which, hey, that's great. They sound use of strategy, but they made quick work of that mind flayer and found a bunch of parasitic items, which I was very excited to give them those parasitic items, full well knowing that they might just rebuff them immediately, just on the principle.
They know they're parasitic.
Yes, I made it very, very clear. Like, so the gibbering master spits out these artifacts that had been collecting. They're pulsing with sinew. I need you to understand. I tried to make it as obvious as possible.
It sounds like I need to make a character to just play with some of these parasitic items.
Yeah. What was most interesting to me in that term was that the one item I didn't expect them to take was the only item anyone took with the intention of using, which was the earworm. So that's
oh no.
In terms of actual highlight moments, we had some wonderful character moments with Vidric and Moira in there. Vidric had a particular interest in this mission, I feel, because of like Mord holds, dwarven heritage type stuff. And ultimately the session resulted in them finding out that the two parties of interest over this land dispute in the village were not in the equation, and instead it was Vidric's clan was part of the parties of interest. So I think the realization over that happening and the kind of resolution of things from this heated land dispute to a more peaceful talk was an interesting moment to mediate as Vidric kind of took this in. Got some nice knickknacks for himself.
Sounds like a lot of cool, like crazy pulpy horror stuff mixed with some pretty sweet dwarf related things in the Moorholds, which, you can't go wrong with dwarves. They're the best.
I'm also really glad that you had the Moorholds. I cannot pronounce it. Just because I love seeing dwarves. They're so strong, like in a culture aspect, especially in Eberron too. So seeing them kind of cement themselves in the story would be like really interesting to see how they play out in the rest of Eberron, essentially, and Corvair at large. Austin W.
So for my most previous session, I revived a fan favorite that I'm sure everyone has played before. It's called Death House. Even Andre, you're quite familiar with the session that I pulled. So for all of those who don't know what Death House is kind of like a two-part dungeon. You have this Victorian manor that's at the top front, and you go through and you kind of fight these ghosts that tell a story of betrayal and a double murder-suicide and this sort of madness that has overcome this house. And then I kind of switch it around with a bit because Death House is originally a level 2 to 3 sort of adventure. So making it a level 6 adventure, I had to beef up the monsters a little bit. I still kept the original story, but at the very end, when the players finally reach the attic, the female, the head of house, was a ghost, and she just kind of pointed to the secret chamber and said, "I do not fear my husband nor my daughter. I fear the things that live in the basement." And that's when the point that there is a sliding wall that reveals another set of spiraling stairs that goes down into the basement. And eventually the players go down into the basement and they see that it's kind of like a normal crypt. but it suddenly becomes this smooth tunnel with this weird script on the walls. And the script is Mind Flayer script, which if you touch it, then you'll be able to understand what it says. Nobody actually touched the script, which I'm rather surprised, nor did they use comprehend languages, but they found out by the end of the dungeon that after exploring like a laboratory full of brains and their bed chambers that were full of pods with water, that they come across this little tiny Fabergé egg. And as soon as one of the characters, which I believe was Yud, or no, I'm going to say Yud, touched it, they immediately stop. They have to make a wisdom saving throw of 25. And if they fail, they are basically charmed, and that they start speaking with the voice of 3 other creatures. And these creatures are known as the Alhoon. And the Alhoon are kind of the pseudo-liches of the Mind Flayers sort, in the sense that they're not an illithid lich, which is a true lich for Mind Flayers, but they're rather a coven of arcane Mind Flayers who have discovered that you can technically do undeath through psionic means. In an attempt, they tried to rationalize not leaving the house with this object, but it was their only key out. So they were kind of stuck in this kind of paradox. Do we let them out of this house? Do we stay here forever with them? And so the illithid liches, the Alhoon, kind of had a backup plan to get them scurrying, which is releasing their monster, which was a corpse flower. And through the use of some clever tactics and a fire elemental, they were able to defeat the corpse flower. And they thought they had more leverage on the Alhoon, but the Alhoon said that they had one more trick up their sleeve and started to let the entire place collapse, forcing them to kind of escape with the egg, which is kind of known as the periaptive mind trapping. And when they all made it out of the house safely, contained with this egg. The egg is currently in seclusion under careful watch. And right before they all left, none of them noticed this, but the house slowly starts to reform.
Magic. So Alhoon now, magical Mind Flayers they generally are not accepted in Mind Flayer communities because of their magic, right?
Exactly. They're kind of outcasts, and while a single a single Mind Flayer can become like a Mind Flayer Arcanist, like Andre had in his, a group of them can kind of pull their magical powers together to create this coven. And if a Mind Flayer becomes like a level 18th to 20th spellcaster, they have the means to become a true lich themselves.
Alhoon are freaking cool. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I love playing with them. They're really fun characters to roleplay.
So
we have a couple of things from chat. Mainly being Hisden. Sorry, I'm saying your names wrong. Says Andre is my favorite. Bird of Eddie Omen is thankful for you guys with help with their backstory, and hopefully us telling you what this session arc is like will help you a little bit forward. Eberron is a constantly changing campaign, so even though it might be that you're a little bit lost in the story, that's kind of the nature a bit of how changeable this world is. There's a lot that anybody can miss, but there's a lot that you're going to see that other people aren't going to see either, as long as you take that chance.
Yeah, it's not like, everyone's missing a little bit something. We hope to bring together into the Story So Far channel and to give kind of like a message of what's going on in the big picture. But yeah, it's definitely easy to get lost in each individual session when you're there doing it and there's people happening other places.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, GMs. Right now, the aeronaut's goal is to try and preserve the Tree of Life because they notice that it is starting to fail and a lot of crazy things are happening, and that's not good to Corvair and the world at large.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I would say that. I don't think. I think they've preserved the Tree of My Life as much as possible. I think currently they just have to suffer through the consequences of what went down in the Frostfell, because I don't think that they could possibly undo the harm that has already been done.
And again, Bird of Any Omen, the Tree of Life is how to define it in a realistic standard that we humans understand. It is kind of like the Tree of Yggdrasil. It's a magical tree that runs through the plains, right? Through Eberron, the planet itself, and essentially holds everything together and keeps these Delcair from entering the material plane and creating chaos and madness and evil.
Which is exactly what I play off of now. I love Delcair.
It's Arc 2 has been a wonderful little box to open because of all the stuff that we can pull out and play with. It's great.
But for anything else,
yeah.
Sorry, we do have the channel in our Eberron Discord, which is Story So Far, and Donovan, their voice is the admirable admiral, or not mess that up.
No one gets that in their first try. Even on your fifth try, the first time you do it, you're not going to.
I was there when we created the name, and I knew immediately the moment when we did it, I'm like, this is a mistake.
A good mistake. Yeah, you were saying that you really enjoy Arc 2 and Andre, the box that it opened. So how do you guys feel like it has affected your storytelling, I guess, working in Arc 2? Because it has a different feel than the first one.
Let's see, it's in terms of storytelling, comparing Arc 1 and Arc 2 is very interesting to me because I can see kind of, between everyone really. Arc 1 is a lot more of the pulpy adventure type of thing you'd expect to see from the cover of Eberron. You look at the front of the book and you're like, wow, I can be a robot with a guy and have a dinosaur while exploring a ravine. Wowie, that's so cool. It's like, well, not to infantilize the concept, but like, it's very, punchy action. But then now I can get into the interesting part of pulp to me, which is the horror. I love pulpy horror. I love Lovecraftian stuff, and this is where we can do all of that. So I've been able to do a lot more like mysteries and intrigues. The way I like to interact with the book and the material is like taking things that I like and treating them like jigsaw puzzles, trying to find places where they're going to fit, and there's just kind of like putting pieces of it, chunks of it together, taking a step back and being like, look at the thing that I just put together. And then people can interact with it however way they want to. And Arc 2 has really allowed me to do that in a way that I think is very fun.
That's awesome.
Do you find that a lot of the stuff you're preparing kind of gets thrown away at the end of the night?
Yes.
Do you end up reusing it, you think, or for new sessions if it's a really nice hook or something you really want to explore?
I mean, it's not like the players are gonna know that they didn't do the thing. So like, there's no harm in me recycling an idea that I already have.
I mean, as was saying that you kind of like puzzle piece your sessions together, with the fact that you guys are doing so many sessions every single week, I think that's a fantastic way to avoid burnout and still have interesting themes. And Austin W., do you have any?
I was about to say that this doesn't really affect the way I DM at all. In fact, I think it really brings out the better part of my DM skills, which is the horror, eldritch horror based sort of storytelling. I've always enjoyed like the unknown storytelling, the mysterious tentacle that's coming from underneath the door, what's beyond the next room, what the terrible landscapes. So the fact that we get to explore that in season 2 is great. Comparatively to the swashbuckling sort of adventures, it's a little bit different, just because with swashbuckling, I feel like the storytelling is not as specific, so you could go with it in any direction that you wanted, which I feel like is more easier for some people, but for me, heading into the horror genre is a lot more easier for me.
Do you have a lot of experience running like different horror things outside of just Eberron as well? Like when you DM other types of Dungeons and Dragons?
Yes. My other types of horror isn't necessarily that much eldritch. It's much more suspense of what could be coming next. But I always have run a Halloween one shot for my friends around that time of year. It never usually falls on Halloween, but they always pick me, and they always go like they almost kind of like spin a wheel and say, "What theme do we want to do this year?" Last year was I think it was werewolves and mummies was the thing last year. And so I had to do something with the Mummy Lord and kind of almost like Tomb of Annihilation, but slightly different.
Very cool. What about Mr. Hatch? How do you feel about the way this affected your storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I'm a big hack and slash type of guy, and there's something to be said about like pirates, right? And just your basic enemies, orcs and things like that. And when it comes to fighting, but it can get a little dull in the actual combat. But I think that there is just something about the fact that we are talking about mind-altering chaos, that the rules don't apply, and that it allows me the chance to just do crazy things or just things that they weren't expecting, and really livens up the fighting. And I love that part.
And this is why I love D&D, because if you have a good DM that knows that your imagination is the limits, you can do whatever the heck you want.
Exactly. And like I feel like last session there was a point when they were fighting through these demons that they had come to realize that these were the past priests that have been corrupted their bodies and things like that. So there's also a level of comfort that they can find in just the weird mind altering bits, and that forces them to make weird choices, as one of the creatures was this priest, and they actually felt bad for the guy and they wanted to spare him and tried everything they could to save him. And I feel like the fact that I could play with the insanity and I could still put a little humanism in it, that there's just that extra bit for them.
I'm curious then, going, because you're big hack and slash, so you do a lot of combat. This is perfect for a question from the chat from Goisy Gaming. And this I'll ask Austin Hatch first, but I'll extend to everyone after. Are players crushing the combat encounters too easily, do you feel, in your sessions?
Well, a little bit of a DM insight. Things change in the middle of combat sometimes. I mean, if there's, I try to make sense for the story. If there's a point where they're just crushing something that it just too easily, and that's more of my fault, not entirely based on the way they're doing things. Because if they do things that are intelligent, they make traps, they do this, they do that, and they plan something out, for sure, they can kill a boss one hit, and I would love that. But if it's more of just I happen to put the wrong creature out, I may make it a little bit tougher as we go. But to be honest, I think since I do a lot of hack and slash, I kind of understand where that equilibrium lies.
How about you, other Austin?
So I find that to the players, it may seem like you're crushing the encounters too much. Keep in mind, I could have killed you all at any moment with my monsters, especially with my last session with the corpse flower. He's supposed to make 3 tentacle attacks with a DC poison concentration as well, and then as a bonus action, he can either summon a zombie or heal himself. I kind of made the summon zombies healing into part of one of those 3 actions as well. And like Austin said, it's always hard to gauge who you're going to be playing with. So if I had like 3 paladins on my team, they would have crushed through that, and so you kind of have to adjust last minute. And I think that brings up another good question that we had on the stream of how CR is important to horror. CR to DMs is kind of like a guideline. You can put them against like a CR 12 monster when they're all level 5 party and dumb it down enough so that in mid combat you're not going to kill them. But you could also take like a CR 3 monster, and if they are going to smash this thing in 2 rounds, give them undead fortitude, and so they have to last another round, and maybe make them self-destruct at the end, and they splatter goo and stuff, and you have to make a poison or disease save. Lots of things that there are variables in combat, and what seems like crushing to one person seems like a rather balanced encounter to another.
Yeah, and if I could add something to that, there's a little like motto that I kind of run by when it comes to D&D, which is just, as Austin was saying, we could crush you. We could, we're God. We could just end the game if we wanted to. Comment, end it. But that's not our goal. Our goal is to make great stories about great heroes. And obviously there's some failures in those stories, but it's about how the hero succeeds. It's about how the hero wins. And if that's our goal, then obviously it's going to look like you crush it, but it's because that's part of the story. But I think it was a little difficult.
Very well said.
Yeah, I'm very much inclined to agree. I'm similarly in the same camp of like, my interest in combat is not in me getting the upper hand on you, right? I'm not putting these creatures out so that I can be like, ooh, this will be perfect. This will kill all of my players. I want to create a situation where you're able to, feel clever, or you're able to feel cool, or you're able to kind of crush the thing in front of you without feeling like I'm handing it over. Because I'm not there to just make you win. I'm there to put a problem in front of you and see what you do about it. That being said, there have been quite a few times where I look at some combos of creatures that I'm like, ooh, this will be nasty. I'll put that out there. I want to see how they deal with it. And then I kind of pull the punch last second just because I'm that kind of person. And it ends up making the fight a little quicker. I'll say. I wouldn't say easier, but there's definitely have been opportunities where I want to create a sense of danger because like part of the storytelling, part of what I think could be a cool moment of combat is coming back from the brink. Everybody likes an underdog story. Like when you're fighting the mind flayer and he shoots a lightning bolt at you and you're at 10 health and you're like, oh no, what's going to happen now? Those are moments that I think are very interesting, but those are moments that I don't force upon anybody. And I do pull punches quite often, like in the mind flayer fight. After the fight, I realized I could have just had him go invisible, go up next to somebody, grab him and eat the brains for like 50 damage. And I forgot I could do that. So that probably would have made the encounter a lot more difficult. Granted, it probably would have made it a little less interesting because it could have just killed someone outright. So
I mean, and without going into any DM secrets for any future stuff, when the players fail an obstacle or have a failure, I'm sure as a player it can feel like a failure, and I think that's okay. Not all heroes succeed. But it's interesting because the nature of the world that we're creating with the rest of the DMs are always constantly evolving and changing. So every failure is now a new opportunity for the DMs to give you players another chance to fix it. Or this failure is a way to shape the world. And then that gives you backstory for your characters to be like, oh, now I'm more invested in the story and in my hero journey or this NPC or this villain. And I hope that as a player, that's something that you guys can latch on to and enjoy with the DMs, because we're certainly enjoying it.
for sure.
Yeah, and I noticed you've all talked about horror and the mind. You've all talked about mind flayers, especially one way or another, which is perfect for Bird of Any Omen's question. How big of a theme is the mind in season 2? I know we've talked about theme a bit, but if anyone has any ideas about expanding upon that.
Well, Zoria is the plane of madness, and that is definitely taking over a heavy portion of our season 2 session. So I say the mind is going to be very important. Be sure that your wisdom score is rather high this season. That's all I can say.
Mind is taking center stage this go around. Although I'm kind of dubious on that, because like mind in the most vague sense, yes, but I feel like it's more about the indescribability or like things you don't understand, as opposed to like, ooh, my brain hurts, type of thing. It's like looking at something and not recognizing the shape that it has, whether it's moving, whether it's alive, that kind of thing. It's very like the horror of question, I think, is what.
For sure. I'm like that's the big thing about horror in general, and I think horror is the theme, and horror is about the limits of the mind, how far we can know and what we do know. I mean, think about the original Alien. You don't know where that alien came from. You don't know anything about that alien. You just know that it's killing your crewmates, and that's scary. And it's things like that. I think that's what we're trying to hit home. We're trying to get things that are just, maybe you haven't seen it as a player, maybe your character hasn't seen it at least, and that's just something that's interesting in a dynamic that you can play with.
I forget the exact phrase that I read somewhere, but it's like, it's the terror not of being like, oh, I'm being chased by this terrible monster, or like this thing's about to eat me always, but it's the slow, eerie draw of like coming home and finding that every object in your house has been replaced by an identical copy. It's not like, a monster's chasing you. That's very bizarre, and you don't know the motives. It's that kind of thing.
All of our DMs love drinking the Lovecraft juice.
Yeah, pretty much.
What I'm hearing.
It's a tasty juice. It's a tasty juice.
But I mean, the origins and consistency is quite undescribable, but we just can't get enough of it.
Can't leave our home during quarantine. That juice will take our minds places.
Mm-hmm. By the amount of times. Go ahead.
I suppose I was going to lead into my next question, which is, what kind of games do you guys like running? But I suppose we could turn it into a little bit of a horror question, and going into describing what kind of horrors do you as DMs like to explore with your players, and what kind of horror do you as players like to experience?
Horror has been such a present theme on this podcast. So like it's come up like in at least every.
I'm so goth. I know I'm wearing white right now, but like.
It's very much a good thing. So yeah, I think that's a great question. If anyone wants to take it away. How about Austin W?
Okay, sure. I think the best horror is always suspense. That with a little bit of eldritch dread, in which you find yourself in kind of an unwinnable situation. So being stuck in a plane that you have no escape of getting to, and you hear a creak at the door. The door flies open and no one's there. And so you head into the next room and you see that the suit of armor comes to life and starts attacking you. You punch the armor to death and find that a spirit flies out and flies into the next armor. And it's just kind of like hitting points of horror of what's next. This doesn't seem escapable. One thing right after another is my favorite way of pulling out horror. Is this constant dread.
Which I imagine could be difficult as your players find more of their power and their capability.
Mm-hmm. Then that just means I have to throw more stuff at them. If they had a cleric who had turn undead, throw an undead who has turn resistance.
Yeah, I think we are in a very interesting place in regards to that, because levels 5, 6, 7, that kind of range is a place where your character can get some really interesting stuff mechanically, but you're not godlike. You're powerful, which means you can take on some pretty cool baddies, but we can still throw some stuff at you that is insurmountable. It goes back to that thing that Austin was talking about earlier, or Hatch, I should say, was talking about earlier. We could just throw something out that would kill you whenever. We could get a lich with power word kill. That's all you need. Yeah.
Yeah,
But there's so much more that could happen than just your player character dying.
Exactly.
That can be terrifying.
It's the stuff with the Delkir is cool because it really exemplifies that. It's like, dying would be a mercy as opposed to whatever it is that they plan to do with it.
Osnatch, did you have a thought on it?
Yeah. When it comes to the kind of horror I like, I'm a big sci-fi nerd. I've always been a big sci-fi nerd. Things that look cool are cool to me. And so horror to me, I love horror as a genre, as in movies and all these things. But to me, I think the ones that have always gotten me the best are the ones where it's the cool monster. It doesn't always have to scare you, but it has to be something that you understand is scary and that in the moment can be, nerve-wracking at the least, or anxiety-inducing. And so, like, I like monsters that look cool. I like monsters that act cool. I like settings that are nefarious in some way. Like the idea of being in a labyrinth filled with undead and demons. From my last session, I think it exemplifies that. It's not about exactly what exactly is going on, but the setting and the monsters introduced, which I find personally I like in horror.
I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because it kind of made me realize about my own personal preference with horror and style is that I tend to, it's not so much the monster, but the setting, because I feel like horror, or the way that I understand it, it's more about the ambiance and making your players fear this one or two things, this obstacle or creature, but without actually kind of showing that creature right away, so that you can raise that dread, that sense of anticipation. And using the setting is such a fantastic way to amplify that kind of horror. I know if the players were watching us last week, we were talking about hags for a little bit. They're a fantastic creature that can mess with the setting and the horror explicitly. Each hag is going to have a unique personality that you can make. Hags are awesome, but they're fantastic because in the rules, the D&D rules themselves, hags have influence over their setting for like a couple miles.
Yeah.
Where they live, and you can do such wild things, amping up the obstacles they have to get through to get to this creature that can be super creepy and stuff. So I love playing around with that. Ooh. Talis Yuki asks some very good questions. What's with all the lichens and them being the victims? Yeah, I have to, Austin. You're here.
Okay.
I love it.
Yeah.
And
Why
is
don't
it
you
meant
take
to
this
be a
one,
theme,
Austin?
or do we just really love lichens in this DM group? Quinn also introduced a lichen character in our club.
I guess I should start out on this one. So lycanthropy in our sessions just happened to happen. Somebody introduced the lycanthrope there. Every player really loved them, so we just kind of continued throwing lycanthropes here and there. And then, of course, I decide to throw the academy for lycanthropes and shifters called Cherryton Academy. Spoiler for everyone who doesn't understand, this is a Beastars reference. So for me, in Eberron, the lycanthropes do have a background where they are pursued as evil, because there are 13 moons in Eberron, and anybody who knows that a full moon is basically just like a rampage for a werewolf. Well, think of having one like every other day, because at least one of the moons would be in full. So the Silver Flame, which is kind of like the very xenophobic, I don't know, like sort of zealous religion, went on a purge for the lycanthropes about I think it was like 50 to 100 years ago. Maybe it was further than that. I think it might have been before the Great War. But the lycanthropes in Eberron have always been this sort of minority. And for me, that resonates a little bit in terms of storytelling, because I think it's very easy to understand for myself what it's like to be pursued as an evil or an unknown thing just because of what you are and something that you couldn't necessarily help. I think that a lot of D&D players in today's days can also kind of feel with that sort of outcast situation. And I think it's very important to represent those kind of ideas in D&D stories nowadays. Back in the days, they weren't always so queer friendly or person of color friendly. So to represent the struggles of people in real life with and attaching those to characters in sessions now, I think is a really good thing.
We stand an orc conversation here.
Yeah.
And how awesome Eberron orcs are.
Yeah.
Very well said.
Yeah, so I think that's why we as DMs like to do the lycanthropy story so much, is because we really, like, a lot of our DMs understand that sort of ties that they have.
That's awesome. I love that whole perspective you guys bring in, and the ability that everyone can work together. And the players don't get to see this, but behind the scenes, like DMs, we all work really well together. Like getting an idea and then building off of each other, and it's such a joy to watch. Even though I'm not like running sessions myself, when we were at the tavern, like physically, and we're planning out this kind of stuff, to see how people get on the same page and listen to each other is, I think, really, if you want to do something like this to build such a big campaign, you need that. And it's awesome to see how much people have found, not fall in the line, but like can get on the same page with one another. And thank you guys for doing such a good job all the time.
I'm here for Cherry Tin Academy. I love it. I hope that it's a very interesting aspect, especially because I had forgotten that there are 13 moons on Eberron. Seriously? Oh my god, yeah. Like constantly, it makes more sense for shifters.
I think there were actually used to be 14, but then a giant lord punched one in the thing. I think.
Right.
I think that's actually lore, that a giant went up to one of the moons and punched a hole in the moon just to impress someone.
I thought I knew a lot of the lore, and then this stuff comes out, and it's like, is this real?
It's part of the Zendrick lore, I believe.
It's in the book, yeah.
Yeah.
It's in the book. This is fascinating. That's a good segue onto a question that Donovan had written down, if you will allow me to ask it.
No, yeah, go ahead.
Do you feel Eberron lends itself to a certain type of play style, not just play style, or because we were talking about horror and pulp and intrigue before, but is there an aspect of when you guys were getting into Eberron that you felt it lended to a certain type of story you wanted to tell? I know that you, Waston, brought in the shapeshifters, because that was really interesting. Hatch loves madness in the Delkir. And Andre, you're just so, you're so varied.
I'm everywhere.
You're everything. You're just like, man, I can't pick and choose, so I'm just gonna... So was there, when you first started exploring Eberron as a DM, was there something that you immediately connected to that you wanted to tell for a story that you haven't had that chance yet? And yeah, I think we'll stop it there before complicating the question further.
Certainly, yes. The thing about Eberron is that the stipulation that if it exists in D&D, it has a place in Eberron, makes it really easy to make interesting combat, but not any easier than like any other setting. Because combat mechanically is something I can just pick out. Oh, this is an interesting monster, has these features. I'll stick them together and see what happens. I'm not too worried about any lore when that happens. What's really interesting to me about Eberron is how, one, sort of modern it is, and two, how fresh everything is, and how everything seems to either have an agenda or be connected to another part of the world. Like all these nations have motives, all these dragon marked houses have like industries they run, and that may or may not have a dirty underbelly, that kind of thing. I like to explore the nooks and crannies of I hesitate to say politics of Eberron, but like the dynamics of the way that there's institutions and everything has foundations and bonds and flaws in that world. It's fun.
I want to write so many politics intrigue, but boy, do I not have the time.
I think that's a good thing to tie in there is that the Forgotten Realms was all about combat. You go off to a distant land, you fight an exotic monster, you got it. Eberron, you have a lot more room for intrigue. You have the 12 Dragonhold houses who are kind of mega corporations fighting against each other. You have the after effects of a major war with a cataclysmic event. How does that affect the societies? How is the relationship between the different planes, like the relationships of lycanthropes with those of the Delakir, and of the gatekeepers and the Delakir? And there's so much friction that you kind of have to choose a side in the end. Whose side are you going to be on? And I think that leaves a lot of room for intrigue.
Yeah, this is the exact, very, very well put together. It's like the reason why Eberron is so cool, I think, is because it's very, very hard to be neutral about anything. You have to. It's like this. The situation is put together in front of you in such a way that like someone is going to force you to choose a side eventually, and that's for the better or for the worse. It makes for some really interesting storytelling.
And of course, our resident hack and slash guy. I'm curious how Austin Hatch, what your answer to this question would be.
And it's extremely weird because it's the exact opposite. One word, Newsies. But I was going through that book and I see a section on how to play a character group of newsies and people in the newspapers and the intrigue in that. Man, my mind went off. I love it so much.
Yeah.
Because I can still do hack and slash with that. I can still go, you guys are, a group of newsies trying to find the best scoop. But the way to do that is you're going to have to go somewhere. You're going to have to be part of the news. And I think it's just the fact that that's even in the book and that's just something spelled out for you just shows you that there was a lot of time and dedication in the smaller things. And as Andre was saying, those crannies, those nooks, those things that you don't often see, they're the best.
I love a good newsy, good reporter. I'm not sure. Have we created an NPC reporter for the Aeronauts yet? Because I feel like that needs to be.
Don't think we have.
But I know what I'm doing next. All right.
Yeah. All right. You got it, Hatch. Can I have a request?
Of course.
Can you make them an Orc of Eberron?
An Orc of Eberron. Sure.
Yeah. A really beautiful, charismatic Orc of Eberron.
Yeah.
Make sure they're shouting extra, read all about it. I mean,
Yes.
if they're not, like you lost an opportunity there.
You're right.
That's cool. I didn't even know that was in the rule book. That's so cool. I guess it fits really well into the whole 20th century feel of it, the newspaper.
Yeah, and there's in the book a whole section on the different kinds of games you can be playing. And one of them is the newsies, but there's spies, there's politics, there's the fighters, there's the military. There's all these sections, and there's compared to Forgotten Realms or any of these other ones, they're just not as well spelled out and not really as well integrated into the lore as Eberron seems to be.
Mm-hmm. I mean, because Eberron is so open, and as Andre said, it's fresh, not just for players to explore, but for the DMs to create too, because you're thinking up oh man, I had never done this in a game before, because you've never had those situations where halflings can ride dinosaurs. I mean, that's a thing. So now you have a session about, hey, let's either get a new car dinosaur, and then we have to feed that car dinosaur, and we have to make a Jurassic Park to maintain that car dinosaur without them eating anything. So it's you can explore all these really new things.
Yeah, and exactly what you're saying is just who's the first person when you're making your world or your adventure? Who's the first person to go, I'm gonna make a newspaper? That's my group.
And that's a great world building aspect for Eberron too.
Yeah, absolutely.
How the different all these different facets interact with each other and how people get their information, I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
And as the players are aeronauts, you kind of are in a place of privilege because you have a lot of access to some of that already, except for all of these intrigue quests, which are why you guys are going out to do these.
I have a question of my own, actually, that just popped in my mind. How do you guys feel about transport in this world? Because in like other D&Ds, it seems like it can take a long time to move around, but Eberron has all these different means. I remember how excited Austin W was telling me about the trains in this world and how cool it was. So
Yes, if it tells you anything, my PC for the world is of House Orion, which is the House of Transport. I love the lightning rail. I am a huge train nerd in my own realm, but to be able to include like events that could happen on trains, such as a train heist, a murder on the a murder like on the lightning rail, all these different stories that you hear about in trains, an explosive going off on the train, trying to stop a train from crashing. Transport in this world just adds an extra bit of element, and not just with the trains, but also with the Lyrandair airships, the dragons, the dinosaur steeds that the halflings use. The transport in this world has been opened up greatly, and I think that really just allows for more storytelling to be told. Do you want a pirate battle in the middle of the sky? You got it. Do you want a train heist where you have to stop all these bandits from robbing every rich person on the train? You got it. It just opens up so much more possibilities, and I love that about Eberron.
And to interject real quick, Austin isn't the only one who has done this. We have very talented DMs, but Austin did have a great proportion of creating the Ghost of Galifar, besides just these lightning rails that you did. So, man, we're such nerds. We're transportation nerds, and we love making airships.
I know.
Andre, would you like to continue?
Oh, yeah. I was just saying the really interesting part of the transportation to me in Eberron is that it creates an accessibility to stories that was previously unforeseen. Like in Forgotten Realms, it's like journey out to this place, getting to this den where I'm going to fight the dragon or whatever is like the journey in and of itself. And that can be fun. You can very easily have like a road trip adventure in Forgotten Realms because that's the only way to get anywhere. But like in Eberron, there's so many things going on everywhere that you can't not have a way to get somewhere. Like if there's a war happening 2 countries away and you need to do something about it, you don't have the time to like take a moseyed trip over there. You have to take a train. You have to fly over there. You have to teleport. Like everything in Eberron is happening so fast that there is no way that Eberron could be the way it is without easily accessible transportation.
Yeah. And I'm not the biggest transportation nerd, but I do understand exactly where Andre's coming from in the sense of like, I don't, especially for us, because we have to do these one shots technically, like they're one shots, but they're in a large story. And we can't have that hike adventure. We can't take 3 days to travel a place. We need to get to the adventure and we need to do the adventure. And I think for us, the capabilities of actually going places opens that up for us. That allows us to actually get to the adventure quicker, unfold the story quicker, and get the players what they want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's so much easier when you have a magical TARDIS or ship or whatever to go wherever you need to do, and you can have your episodic kind of sessions. So I think that's something that I hadn't realized is exclusively something we're doing with Eberron, that access to it. I'm playing a couple of different other campaigns, a Faerun campaign, homebrew, a Call of Cthulhu style campaign, which is very realistic. So you don't have access to transportation, and I think that's something that would be fun to explore in future arcs or sessions in Eberron because it's so prolific. Everybody's reaches, the different houses have such a far reach. So if the aeronauts ever end up limited in any manner in their transportation, that could be an interesting challenge for them, or finding new ways to transport themselves.
Sure.
And I do got to say that we are running a bit low on time, so I'm just going to try and get in, last very good question. I'm sorry, I know that we couldn't get to every question, and there's some very good ones in the chat. But Taylor's question, favorite NPC you've made? I'm going to ask you that, but I'm going to make a little addendum that, but not like your OC that works with the aeronauts, someone different from that. Andre, you seem excited to answer this question.
I was, but the caveat kind of.
Do you guys want to talk about your NPCs? Because I love talking about characters.
Go right ahead. Then I'll let you take it away then.
There's just multiple characters that I've thrown in. I don't like having like, oh, this is my character. This is my proxy to this world. I like just throwing in a bunch of characters that can be like, that guy would have a quest for you. He's fun. Brian Finder was an interesting guy. I'm kind of sad that I'm not going to get to use him as much in this arc because he's, a pirate. It doesn't really have much of a place here. But I don't know. I've been listening to a lot of Magnus archives lately. There's going to be some interesting folks coming up soon.
That's a great podcast. If people haven't checked it out, please do.
Accidental shout out to Magnus Archives.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Best podcast that we know of.
He was my favorite one so far because in as complicated of a world as it is, I just got to make like a crazy rootin' tootin' swashbuckler. So like, I don't know. It was fun.
Austin Hatch?
Yeah. I think so far my favorite NPC, because a lot of the places that I've been going, and I haven't had the most time as all the other DMs. I kind of came in a little late, but obviously a lot of my places are desolate or not a lot of living folk. But my favorite so far has been my two gargoyle guards, Mike and Ike. Mike, he's
I'm gone. I'm by.
Yeah, Mike's this big brutish gargoyle. He's the head of it. He's the one who tells Ike what to do. Ike's skittish. He's he tries his best though, and there's something about that connection. Oh, I love it.
You won me back. I do like dynamics like that when you have two players play off each other. As a DM with two characters that are very much one character in a sense, and if you lose one and they're an enemy, it makes things interesting.
Austin,
right.
for you, Waston, as Lily says.
So I've talked about Jeslyn enough. She's the NPC I play, and I like her just because I like the idea of when I had Eberron in my head of this 1910s adventurer lady running through in like her high heel boots and just like jumping from place to place using portals. However, my favorite NPC that isn't her is probably Lux, which was a character from the Cherryton Academy. He's a tiny little werebat, and he's kind of like a transfer student, and he was from the Night's Watch. I see you all giggling. They have insider information. So he's just kind of like a he's just kind of almost like a self-insert for me. It's very easy to play them. He is kind of it was easy to portray him because I just put me if I was in high school again and just had that sort of naivete inside myself. So
I'm going to put this out there right now. I don't know how many DMs or players do this, but I know all of my theater friends and therapist friends that I DM with and D&D with, we're always like, oh, you're role-playing a new character? This character is just an aspect of yourself that you want to explore? Okay, sure. Let's go with that. Let's talk.
I think it's very easy if you make characters who have personality traits of you, even if it's just one, like it's your grumpy side, or if it's just like your love smitten side, or like something.
Or your obsession with astrology and astronomy, man.
Yeah, exactly. So while like I usually try and put like one trait of myself into the character to make them seem more believable, Lux was just kind of my favorite character because I was able to dump a lot more traits into him.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Hatch.
Oh, no, sorry. I think you nailed it right on the head what you just said, Austin, which was just it's better, it's more believable. You can't completely act out a person's personality if it's entirely fake to you. You don't know it, and that's not something you can make believable, at least not 100%. But if you add a little bit of something, that little bit of you, that thing that you truly do know, then you can act that out 100%, and you can make it believable, and that's what you want.
In role-playing forums, role-playing situations, I've had some people kind of, I would say kind of gatekeep in trying to say, oh, you can't play a character that's a self-insert. And I'm like, that's BS. That's BS to me, because when you're playing this character and you're doing it through a story that the DM's preparing for you, your character's going to make different decisions. You're going to be making these kind of decisions, and you're creating a new life, a fictional life before you through these journeys that you're on. So if a DM says you can't like self-insert, ask them why they feel uncomfortable with self-insert. If there's a way that you can do so respectfully. I feel like all DMs should have this session 0 with their players. And if they're still not down for that, maybe they're not the DM for you. Maybe they're not a role-playing minded DM. Maybe they kind of just want to explore a dungeon, have a hack and slash, and that's fine. But definitely don't feel bad about self-insert, guys.
I can certainly see why some dungeon masters don't want to self-insert, because they want to challenge you in sort of role-playing. But people should understand that role-playing isn't everybody's strongest suit. So if they feel like they need to self-insert, don't hold them back from them, because you might find out you might get a much better sort of role-play interaction with them if they're able to self-insert, rather than try and force them to do something that's not themselves.
And
I think I would like to have this conversation with Nico for certain when we have Nico on, because it can be sometimes very difficult to play a character where you're like, man, I don't have these kind of charismatic traits, I feel, but then you have this character with like a +4 charisma, and it's like, how do you role play that? So we're going a little bit over time. I'm sorry. I love talking with you all. Thank you guys for coming here.
Thanks for having us.
A final addendum. I know Bird of Any Omen had said, in the nicest way possible, I'm going to be sad when the lockdown is over. I've had a lot of fun with you all. And that is our ultimate goal. I'm so glad that if you guys are enjoying yourselves, perfect. We are going to be continuing this at the tavern, most likely. So at the Tavern of Tales in Boston. So maybe you'll be able to actually meet some of the people that you're playing with, if everybody can manage to find their way up to Boston once it's much safer.
Yeah, and also, I mean, this is me throwing this out there right now. Who knows? Maybe if there's enough of a demand, maybe we can work something out where there is.
Yeah,
we can still do some kind of online thing.
Yeah, we're keeping the Discord up so you can continue interacting with your players, with your friends. I hope that you guys have made friends with these random strangers, kind of, not just us as DMs, but all the lovely people who are taking part in this campaign. You guys are so freaking creative. I can't even keep up reading everything you guys are doing. But yeah, thank you guys for coming today. Donovan, do you want to do the spiel, or do I want to? I don't know.
So, we run different things on this channel all week except for Sunday. So please tune back in any day except for Sunday, and you'll find something cool. We've got Magic the Gathering, a D&D campaign with our GMs, a couple of which are featured here today, as well as more Tavern Talks where we talk about board games and TTRPGs. And that's me and Lily, plus some guests sometimes, like today. You can donate at the Tavern of Tales website. You can subscribe to this Twitch channel. Those both help us out a lot. And besides that, is there any other things I'm missing off the top of my head? Thanks for tuning in, guys. And thanks so much for
Tuesday.
PM.
Oh, yes, the VODs on our YouTube channel, Tavern of Tales YouTube channel. If you guys want to catch up on any of the Tavern Talks board game showcases that you guys missed, we have that there. We have our Shattered Lands homebrew VODs as well, which in the last couple of episodes should be very interesting. We're going to be probably having Jake and our Shattered Lands players on Tavern Talks sometime soon to discuss what the heck's going on with that. There's a lot of character changes going on. Jason's character, who was formerly known as White Scales, just became Sigurd, the Dragon Slayer, which is a big thing. So we might be able to discuss a lot of these kind of like characters and arc stuff there. Tyler runs Magic the Gathering again on Tuesday. No, I
Monday.
will never memorize this. I'm so sorry. Mondays and Thursdays. I love Tyler. You guys will love Tyler too. Plays really great music from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. And that's everything, I think.
Thank
Love
you
you guys.
so much. Yeah, it's so nice to talk to you guys again. This is a lot of
I'm waving. You just don't see it.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Just scream, Mike Wazowski. Scream.
Ah!